The first words of Eleanor Roosevelt's memoirs are, "My mother was one of the most beautiful women I have ever seen." That declaration represented an unending reproach and longing that defined the terms of her unfinished relationship with her mother, Anna Livingston Ludlow Hall, who died at 29 when Eleanor was only 8. Anna Hall considered manners more important than feelings, and beauty most important of all. From the beginning, she made Eleanor feel homely and unloved, always outside the closed circle that embraced her 2 younger brothers. Anna mocked her daughter's appearance and chided her manner, calling her Granny because she was so serious even at the age of 2. Before company, Eleanor was embarrassed to hear her mother explain that she was a shy and solemn child. And, E.R. wrote, "I never smiled." From her earliest days, her mother seemed to consider her doomed to social failure, and for her mother, social success was everything. Anna was proud of her family lineage. Her maternal grandmother was Elizabeth Livingston Ludlow, a granddaughter of Chancellor Robert R. Livingston. E.R. remembered the matriarch vividly. Domineering and imperious, she walked with a long cane, which she banged and pointed insistently, and she always got her way. She and her relatives, the Clarksons and De Peysters, had ruled the Hudson River Valley since the 17th century. New York's first Robert Livingston had sailed from Scotland in 1673, allied himself with French and Indian traders, married a Schuyler, befriended a provincial governor, and was sufficiently diplomatic to be ceded a land grant in 1686 that established him as the first lord of the Manor of Livingston, 163,000 acres spanning Dutchess and Columbia counties. His grandson, Philip Livingston, was a signer of the Declaration of Independence. His great-grandson, Robert Livingston, as Chancellor of New York, presided over the inauguration of President George Washington in 1789. Philanthropic and public-spirited, the Livingstons were also leaders of that small circle that became Knickerbocker society. In fact, the first known effort to list America's nascent social aristocracy was made by Sarah Vanbrugh Livingston, who married John Jay, later to become the United States Supreme Court's first Chief Justice. Her dinner and supper lists, compiled beginning in 1787, were largely limited to her cousins, Alsops, Cadwalladers, De Peysters, Van Rensselaers, Van Horns, and always other Livingstons, who continued to marry one another generation after generation. But her lists did also include over a dozen physicians and clerics. Subsequent enumerations made by more narrow-minded folk tended to eliminate such self-created gentry. Shortly after the Civil War, when the new wealth of the Industrial Revolution provided too many aspirants to the upper reaches of society and confused the standards for entry, a Southern fop named Ward McAllister decided to codify America's aristocracy once and for all. He made distinctions between knobs, old families, swells, acceptable new families, and parvenus, unacceptable new families. In 1872, he organized the first of Ward McAllister's Patriarch Balls. 25 illustrious Knickerbockers were chosen to sponsor this annual charity ball, and each patriarch was asked to invite 4 ladies and 5 gentlemen of similar patriarchal status. The Knickerbocker Society thereby numbered 250. But Ward McAllister's chief sponsor, his Mystic Rose, was Mrs. William Astor, Caroline Webster Schermerhorn Astor, whose ballroom comfortably contained 400 people. So it was that the 400, as they were forevermore known, came to be assembled by Ward Make-a-Lister. The names of Mr. and Mrs. Valentine G. Hall, as well as their eldest daughter, Miss Anna Hall, are found on one of the first 400 lists ever published. Later, however, Anna Hall Roosevelt and several of her cousins and friends decided that the patriarchs and even Mrs. Astor had become too democratic, and held a series of Monday and Tuesday dinner dances at Sherry's, then society's most fashionable restaurant and supper club, as well as a variety of alternative cotillions and assemblies, whose even more restricted guest lists better fitted their idea of society. E.R. scorned the unregenerate elitism of her mother's family, but she failed to recognize that her father shared virtually all of their social inclinations. As E.R. reflected on her heritage during the last years of her life, she wrote, "My father, Eleanor Roosevelt, charming, good-looking, loved by all who came in contact with him, had a background and upbringing which were alien to my mother's pattern. I doubt that the background of their respective lives could have been more different. His family was not so much concerned with society, spelled with a big S, as with people, and these people included the newsboys from the streets of New York and the cripples whom Dr. Schaefer, one of the most noted early orthopedic surgeons, was trying to cure." E.R. romanticized her father, remembering herself as perfectly happy whenever she was with him. She saw him as the very opposite of her mother. The fact is that when Anna Rebecca Hall married Eleanor Roosevelt, he was both an eligible and ardent member of her society. Anna was 17 when her father, Valentine Hall, died in 1880. A dour, hypochondriacal country squire who boasted Irish roots and a phenomenal fortune, he was a religious zealot whose primary interests were satisfied by his own live-in theologian. Unlike many of his Knickerbocker colleagues, he never worked to increase the family fortune, considering his father's commercial success sufficient. After all, he was a partner, and the husband of his partner's daughter, in the firm of Tunnelly and Hall, which had unlimited credit throughout the world and large real estate holdings in one of the most booming and valuable neighborhoods in New York City, 6th Avenue from 14th to 18th Street.